Good evening, everyone. I'm call this meeting of the Standing Committee on Government Operations to order. Committee, there is an agenda before us. Today's committee business is the public clause-by-clause review of Bill 31. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve? Mr. McNeely, all in favor? Thank you. Declarations of conflict of interest? Hearing none. Today's committee business is, again, the public clause-by-clause review of Bill 31, Northwest Territories 911 Act, with the Honourable Alfred Moses, Minister of Municipal and Community Affairs. I have a few opening comments, and then we'll get started with hearing from the Minister. I'll ask members to introduce themselves for the record, starting with Mr. Simpson on my right.
Good evening, R.J. Simpson. I'm the MLA for Hay River North. Welcome.
Good evening, Michael Natalie, MLA for Deschaux.
Danny McNeely, Satu. Good evening.
Good evening, Shane Thompson, Nahindi.
Good evening, welcome Herb Nakamak from the Nutwood.
And I am Kieran Tester, member for Cam Lake and chair of the Standing Committee on Government Operations. With me at the table are Jennifer Franki-Smith, committee clerk, April Taylor, committee research advisor, and Sheila McPherson, the law clerk of the Legislative Assembly. Today, the Standing Committee on Government Operations is holding a public clause-by-clause review of Bill 31, Northwest Territories 911 Act. Bill 31, sponsored by the Minister of Municipal and Community Affairs, proposes to direct the Minister to establish a territorial 911 service, bind the Government of the Northwest Territories to establish a 911 cost recovery fee to be paid by local landline and wireless mobile subscribers and collected by telecommunications carriers, mandate the participation of local authorities and emergency service providers, and mandate the participation of telecommunications carriers who will be required to comply with any prescribed registration and reporting requirements, and who will also be required to bill subscribers, collect the fee, and remit it to the GNWT. Bill 31 received second reading in the Legislative Assembly on November 1st, 2018, and was referred to the Standing Committee on Government Operations for review. To commence its review of Bill 31, the Standing Committee on Government Operations sent letters inviting input from an extensive list of stakeholders, including all municipal and Indigenous governments in the Northwest Territories and a number of non-government organizations. During the week of January 21st, 2019, the committee traveled to and held public meetings in Fort Smith, Inuvik, and Fort McPherson, returning to Yellowknife for a final public meeting on January 24th, 2019. Committee thanks every individual and organization who attended these meetings in order to share their views on 911 with members of the committee. As a result of committee's consultations, committee will be proposing three amendments to Bill 31. The details of the submissions received by committee and the nature of committee's deliberations will be addressed in our report to be presented in the Legislative Assembly next week. There are copies of the bill available at the back of the room for anyone who is interested. I will now invite the Honourable Alfred Moses, Minister of Municipal and Community Affairs, to introduce his staff for the record and proceed with any opening remarks he may have. Minister Moses.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for inviting me today to speak to you. And I'd also like to thank members of the committee to talk about Bill 31, the Northwest Territories 911 Act. I would like to introduce the officials that are here with me today. They are here to help provide technical details if questions arise. On my immediate right is Ashley Garrity, 911 Program Manager for Municipal Community Affairs. On my left, Sherry Girock, Legislative Counsel, Department of Justice. Seated in the gallery is my Deputy Minister, Ms. Eleanor Young, Mr. Kevin Brzezinski, Director of Public Safety, and Ms. Trish McFall, Manager of Policy and Planning for Municipal and Community Affairs. And, of course, my Ministerial Special Advisor, Ms. Ronna Sherigan. Mr. Chairman, the purpose of the Northwest Territories 911 Act is to create a Northwest Territories 911 service for the reporting of emergencies through a public safety answering point or call center. Bill 31 requires communities, communication providers, and emergency service providers to participate in the establishment and operation of the 911 system, which is necessary for its effective operation throughout the Northwest Territories. The bill authorizes development and administration of policies, standards, and guidelines that are necessary to operationalize the system, deter inappropriate use of the 911 system, and authorize the call center to perform additional work on behalf of community governments, such as a direct dispatch for their emergency first responders. A significant aspect of the bill is the setting of a cost recovery fee. As committee is aware, the goal of the 911 system is to ensure it operates on a full cost recovery basis. The fee will apply to all communication devices used in the Northwest Territories which connect to 911, including landlines, wireless devices, and voice-over internet protocol connections. Mr. Chairman, much work is underway to implement 911 throughout the Northwest Territories, including preparations for a 911 call center, hiring and training of qualified staff, working with community governments to improve civic addressing, and creating an inventory of available emergency services, implementing a public awareness campaign, system testing, and developing an effective means to evaluate our progress. Municipal and Community Affairs has worked with the Legislation Division of the Department of Justice on the bill and will continue working with them on the drafting of the regulations required to set the cost recovery fee. MACA intends to bring the act and regulations into force prior to the go-live date for the 911 system. The projected go-live date remains June of 2019. However, there are going to be some things that we need to get done first before our telco partners can start moving in the process with that. With that said, Mr. Chairman, this does conclude my opening remarks. I do look forward to hearing any comments, questions that committee may have, and we do have our staff here to answer those questions. And would like to thank the committee for the work that they have done in regards to this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Committee, are there any questions or comments that committee members would like to make at this time? Okay, hearing none, then we'll proceed with a clause-by-clause review of the Bill 31, Northwest Territories 911 Act. If committee agrees. Thank you, committee. We'll defer the title of the bill until the end and begin with consideration of the clauses. There are 14 clauses in the bill. Please turn to page 1. Clause 1, does committee agree? Thank you, committee. Clause 2, does committee agree? Clause 3, does committee agree? Clause 4, does committee agree? Mr. Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I move that Bill 31 be amended by adding the following after subclause 4(4). 5, for a period of 3 years following the coming into force of this section, the cost recovery fee established under subsection 1 shall be no more than $1.70 per month.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. The motion's in order. To the motion. Mr. Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This motion is in response to what we heard when we went on the road and traveled around the Northwest Territories. The cost of living is one of the primary concerns of residents of the Northwest Territories. And while this is a valuable service and it received support everywhere we went, there was concern about this monthly charge, especially the fact that it was so open-ended and we had no definitive answer about what it would be. And I know early on there was talk of 99 cents a month, and over time the cost has risen, and the most recent costs we got were a little bit higher than that, and those don't even include fees that would be charged by, I believe it's CRTC and the service provider. And so this number is sort of a happy medium, we found. And there's a sunset clause. So the concern was that because this has not been operational, because no one knows how much it's going to cost, and, you know, estimates are only estimates, and even the best estimates can sometimes be off. We didn't want people, you know, in 6 months looking at their bill and having a $5 charge on there. So we proposed this, or I'm proposing this, so that the department can sort of get its feet underneath itself when it comes to delivery of this service, and things can be reassessed after 3 years, at which point this clause would sunset. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. To the motion? Question has been called. All those in favor? Thank you. All those opposed? The motion is carried. Does the minister concur with this amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and just to give a little bit of an update, I did bring this and had a good discussion with my MACA staff on this particular motion. I've also chatted with my cabinet colleagues, and we are able to and move forward and concur with this motion. So yes, I do concur with the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Committee, to Clause 4 as amended. Does committee agree? Agreed. Thank you, committee. Clause 5, does committee agree? Agreed. Thank you, committee. Clause 6, does committee agree? Agreed. Thank you. Clause 7, does committee agree? Thank you. Oh. I'm going to return to clause. I'm going to return to clause 7. Okay. Committee, clause 7. Mr. McNeely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that Bill 31 be amended by adding the following after subclause 7, brackets 2, brackets 3, for greater certainty, subsection brackets 1, does not prohibit a person from programming the number 911 on any speed dial feature of any communication device. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McNeely. The motion's in order. To the motion, Mr. Simpson.
Thanks. And in case anyone's wondering what this motion is about, Section 7.1 talks about an automatic dialer, and it's an offense to hook an automatic dialer to 911. That's not a common term that people are familiar with, and we had people who thought that meant speed dial on a phone or something like that. So this is just for clarity, so the public can, read the bill and be comforted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. To the motion. Question has been called. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Does the minister concur with this amendment? Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, I do concur with the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Committee, to clause 7 as amended. Does committee agree? Thank you. Clause 8, does committee agree? Clause 9, does committee agree? Clause 10, does committee agree? Clause 11, does committee agree? Mr. Natalie, I see you have a motion to move.
Do, Mr. Chair.
You have the floor.
I move that Bill 31 be amended by adding the following after clause 11. Reporting. Did I read it? Yeah. 11.1, subbracket 1. For the purposes of this section, official language means the language referred to in Section 4 of the Official Languages Act. Bracket 2, the minister shall, within 90 days following the end of each fiscal year, table a report of the NWT 911 service in the Legislative Assembly, which includes for the preceding fiscal year, A, the total number of 911 calls received, including the number of calls received, bracket 1 in each official language of the Northwest Territories, bracket 2 from each community or region of the Northwest Territories, and bracket 3 in each month of the preceding fiscal year. B, the total funds collected through the imposition of the cost recovery fee. C, a breakdown of the operational costs of the service. And D, information regarding the performance of the service.
Thank you, Mr. Natalie. The motion's in order. To the motion. Mr. Simpson.
Thank you. And this is just something so that the public can see what we're doing with 911. And I think it's good. I think it'll benefit everyone, including the department, to show the good work that's going on. It was something that was missing, and I think that because it's coming out of people's cell phone bills or their phone bills, we sort of owe it to them to show them where it's going. So that's all this is. I think it's a good clause. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Otherwise known as value for money. Thank you, Mr. Simpson. The motion, again, is in order. To the motion. Okay, thank you. The question's been called. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Does the minister concur? Mr. Minister?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And appreciate the work that committee has done in terms of adding this, bringing this motion forward to us as the department, but as a government. It'll help us as we move forward in terms of monitoring and evaluating this program. It is new right across the territory. With that said, yes, I do concur with the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. To Clause 11 as amended. Does committee agree? Thank you, committee. To Clause 12, does committee agree? Clause 13, does committee agree? Clause 14, does committee agree? Okay, we will now return to bill number and title. Bill 31, Northwest Territories 911 Act. Does committee agree? Does committee agree that Bill 31, Northwest Territories 911 Act is now ready for consideration in committee of the whole? Mr. Simpson?
I move that Bill 31, Northwest Territories 911 Act be reported to the Assembly as ready for consideration in committee of the whole as amended. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. The motion's in order. Motion's on the floor. To the motion. Question has been called. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Bill 31, Northwest Territories 911 Act will be reported to the Assembly as ready for consideration in committee of the whole as amended. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Thank you to your officials, and thank you to everyone for joining us either in person or online for these proceedings. We are now adjourned.